Previously on Chaser.
Kabir.
Chaser. I am so very happy to meet you in person, Mr. Chaser. On the shore, we will make contact with a Russian patrol. They will transport the goods inland to the railway and from there directly to the Cosmodrome. And that is where you wish to go, is it not? Open the gate. We do not wish to attract unwanted attention.
Hello and welcome back. We've got a long haul ahead of us, so buckle in and I'll try and get you through safely. Luckily, this actually turns out to be one of my favourite levels, so hopefully I should be able to keep you entertained throughout. If you just bear with me, I'm just going to spend some time trying to jump around on top of the truck to try and find a gap in the wall somewhere, but unfortunately I don't find any. Once again, the location that we're at is an actual real place. I won't bother showing it on a map, it's just basically to the west of where we were before. And as I said, it exists. It's a very small and isolated place. As you can see, it's a nighttime level, and we're going to be making huge use of the night vision. In fact, I'll be using the same tactic pretty much all the way through this initial part of the level, where I just, as you can see here, let the enemies fire and then kind of home in on their position that way. This level is split into three basic environments. The first one obviously is outdoors, and this is the one that we're going to be taking to get inside the base. So we'll just take a quick detour, however, and we'll have a look up here where the actual gate is that we have to open. It'll just give us an idea of kind of what the base looks like. We will see this from the other side later on, but for the moment it's quite a distance away. Here's something that generally you don't really see all that much. The fog in front of the lights it's obviously just a particle effect, and it's really nothing spectacular, but it's something this particular setup you don't really see anywhere. If anything, generally fog lights and things like that generally tend to be static in most games, but here they've added an extra bit of flair and made it like there's at least some atmosphere and wind going around, and I think it's a fantastic touch. Much like the previous level, we have an obstacle in our way, so we have to find another way to get behind it and open the door so, well, our gang can get a move on. In this case, we're trying to make our way through a train station. Now, we were originally supposed to be able to go through here without any trouble, but given that we're having some issues with the natives, I guess we're going to have to play things a little bit closer to the chest. This section shows just how important enemy placement is. If the enemy happen to be looking in the other direction, you generally are in a much better position to kill them, simply because they obviously don't see you. And it's like the previous level in that the fog, well, while it affects you, it doesn't really affect the enemy all that much. They can see you at the outer limits of the fog, and if you're not zoomed in and you don't know exactly where they are, you're in a bit of trouble. And on top of that, if they've seen you first, then you're really in for some pain. For the moment, things are pretty straightforward. We just kind of follow this canyon along, and there's not really much more to it than that. Eventually, however, things start to branch out, and well, we end up with optional paths, and I'll try to take some of them, but I generally won't be covering everything. We'll show you the more interesting places at least. You may think we have a little bit of an advantage having the sniper rifle, but As you'll see here, they have them too, and they're not afraid to use them. Most of the time you generally will die in this level quite a lot, and the only real way that you'll get through it consistently is to know where all the enemies are and be able to take them out in advance. When it gets to the point where the enemies start to roam around, then things obviously get a bit more challenging. Interesting sound effects there. They actually vary between a wolf and a tiger for some reason, and there's also the noise of some sort of snarly beast running around. But these are things we'll never bump into, so it's not really much of an issue. Now I understand in advance just how important the sniper ammo is going to be, so bear with me while I pick all of it up. Probably the biggest problem you'll find, at least in terms of when I'm playing it, is that the enemies will hide behind trees and such, and they can see through it just fine while you can't. So you'll see me kind of blind firing through it every now and then to try and hit them, but usually it doesn't work. Most of the deaths in this area were up to that guy who spawns halfway up the cliff for no particular reason, but now that he's gone, things should be a little bit easier. This area is the first one with the forking path. We've got one off to our right and one directly ahead, so we'll take the one directly ahead of us first. Coming up to these hills, it's always a case of taking things very slowly, especially around those trees, because there's usually always a guy hanging around there, and it's a hell of a lot of trouble if you just charge in, because you go over the top of the ridge and then you've got usually about 5 or 6 guys just blasting at you, so obviously it pays to take things slowly. Sometimes, however, the enemies just will not budge and you have to basically rush them in order to get anything done. Got myself killed a few too many times there, so I'm just going to double back and take that other fork in the path that we had open to us. We'll see if we might have some better luck over that way. Sometimes the game will be a bit of a nuisance and just spawn some guys behind us. Not particularly helpful, and really there's kind of no point because there's plenty of enemies ahead, so why they felt the need to put them behind us, just it seems a little unfair. Here's a bit of a closer look at the commandos that we're fighting. They're pretty nondescript, and there's no real telling. There's no way to tell what kind of faction they belong to if they are indeed the Soviet army. You just kind of have to guess that they are, I suppose. Just ahead we've got a little crossroads where we can pick quite a few places to go. The way we're meant to go is basically straight ahead. But what we're going to do is we're going to skirt up around the side, mainly because it just shows some slightly different scenery. It's more of a rocky, tight little canyon rather than the big wide open ones we've been seeing so far. Just adds a little bit of variety. Things generally aren't that maze-like. You would be hard-pressed to find yourself lost. You just basically walk in a straight line and you'll get where you need to go. Once again, we've got somebody spawning behind us, and you may already have noticed a new friend that we've got. It's not really anything special, but it's certainly memorable at least. Let's just have a muck about with this guy for a moment. And we're off again. You may have noticed some of the electricity pylons above us. That basically tells us that we are directly below the base. There's an entrance that we'll be coming across that's ahead of us that we'll end up doing a U-turn on and getting back to where we need to be. But it shows we're going in the right direction. I may appear to be overly cautious, but if there's one thing I remember about this level, it's this part. There, just like the bridge before us, we've got a couple of sniper guys just kind of hanging out on top of some boulders, and I've died here so many times that I'll never forget that there are guys there to kill. Except of course that guy who I did forget about. I really wish the game had more things like that. I think that's a pretty cool moment. It just livens the place up. We've just made the U-turn, which I mentioned earlier, and we're now just heading up to the actual base itself. And as you may have guessed, the helicopter, well, although we're not directly going to be fighting it, it will be offloading some guys and we'll have to take care of them. The helicopter acts kind of like any other kind of enemy. When you get close enough and you get spotted, it triggers offloading all of the other guys, who can then shoot through the helicopter when they're on the other side of it, which doesn't help, but it just flies away, and then you have to fight along as normal. Running into the middle of them is obviously not a good idea. We could be using these buildings for cover. It's certainly a tactic I've used before, but I find it's just generally easier, especially in this part, to just hang back as far as I can and pick them off from a distance with a sniper rifle. Kind of lazy, but well, I'm not particularly healthy, so I need to stay alive as long as I can. So here we are, finally at the main entrance to the base. Just gonna take a quick tour around the place so you can just have a look at, I don't know, just have a look at the outside before we make our way in. I'm a little unsure about this little light tower here. There's no way in, so I'm not sure if it's supposed to be manned or not. But it's strange to have just this one particular thing not attached to the main wall like all the other lights are. It's a little weird. One thing you should pay attention to is the ambient noise, in that there is none. This will become a factor in a moment. As you can hear, we found ourselves a bug. If we, well, you can hear it already, the helicopter ambient noise is banging away. If we walk back, we'll actually get to the location right where the helicopter was landed, and that's where the noise is loudest. It doesn't go away at all, it just stays there for the duration, so yeah, they maybe should have tested that a little bit more. And we are finally inside the base. The next step is to find a control room. It's not quite that simple. We do have a little bit of trekking to go. We have to find the right place to begin with, and then we have to actually get to the control panel within it. And those are two very separate jobs. We'll just move ahead for the moment and see where it takes us. A little bit of exploring shows us that we don't really have many options as far as getting around. A few conveniently placed containers and a very badly parked truck kind of limit our options quite a lot. But we've got a door. There's actually another way around the back, but we'll come back to that later. The door is our first step. Since we're at a much closer range now, we've changed our weapon back to the AK, which is good. It's perfectly suited for this. This is one of those strangely over-designed rooms. There's one way in and two ways out, but it's got this little shack building and a bit behind it where you can't go. It's, like I said, it's just a bit over-designed. There's a bit too much going on. Going around this way takes us back to the broken wall where we got in, showing us the other direction we could have taken instead of the door. We've got a collapsed tunnel here leading into the mountain. It looks very nice, and it's one of those nice touches you'll find all over this level, and this is one of the reasons why I really like it. Because it has little touches like this. I'll point them out as I come across them, but this is really one of the first major ones.
Поймайте мне эту суку!
There's a rooftop just ahead of us that plays some significance later on. That's in fact right at the end of the level, and we come out that way onto this particular tower, and then we drop our way down and make our way to the end of the level. But yeah, it's nice to see that we do actually end up coming back here. This area itself doesn't really have much going for it. It's got lots of doors and buildings and things, but really it's just scenery stuff. kind of a minor inconvenience, but we have to get through that door, so we need to find a button to open it. It's not the same one that's going to open the main gate, but it's just kind of a minor one to start off with. And to get to that, we have to go back into the little indoor area we were at before and take the other door. And then we just have to make our way back again. Now that we've opened that door, we can get through into the next large area. As you can see, there's already some guys there popping off some shots at us, but we'll get to them. Of course, it's not always that simple. You might have noticed that when I previously went through the larger outdoor area, it was kind of creeping around and things, and this is the reason why these guys spawn, pretty much, as soon as you press the door open button. And I wasn't I was expecting them to come out earlier, but they kind of got the drop on me whenever I came out this time, because I thought I'd killed them all, or I was just imagining things. This is what I saved all of the sniper rifle ammo for. I've got more than enough, but yeah, this is the reason why. It's just basically to take out these guys in the distance, because they do have a very unfair advantage over you. You can see we've got something new on these antennae. We've got some kind of red signal transmission going on. We'll find out more about that later, but yeah, it's something new to look at. Over there we've got the poorly parked truck that was blocking us earlier on, and up here we have a very large weird looking door. You may think that this is a door that we're looking to open, and in some ways it is true, but it's not the main door, which is, this level's kind of one door after another, and then this is just another one, but this actually ends up being the most complicated one to open, but we'll get on with that right now. We already had a little look into the entrance of our next destination. Down this ramp here is into a car park, but the actual way that we get in is just up here. It should be obvious that we're supposed to go down the hole, but we're going to jump in here and have a look at this door, which is another one of those fantastic things that this level has going for it. It's so needless, but the amount of work that's gone into this door, it obviously looks like someone's tried to knock it down, but all the metal cabling and stuff inside the concrete has been holding it in place. But it's just one of those touches that I think is fantastic. the door back up through the hole. It's, as far as I can tell, it's there to justify the fact that we have a hole going into the car park in the first place. It seems fairly obvious that people have tried to break their way in here before. Maybe the Soviet army originally lost this place and someone else took it over and then they took it back. It just kind of tells that there's another story that went on behind all of this, and it seemed that they tried the door, couldn't get through, so they blew a hole in the floor and went through the car park instead. Well, I think that's a fairly obvious indication that we really don't want to be walking any further forward, especially since we've only got 2 health. Maybe we'll come back here later on. In fact, we will, and we'll be able to show you something that I had not realised at the time, but I feel like a bit of an idiot that I didn't even notice it here. This flight of stairs actually features quite prominently for 2 reasons, which we'll find out later on. But for the moment, we'll just clear out some of the bad guys that are knocking around here. These areas off to the side, the storage areas, you'll see that there's large shutters in the way, and that's kind of a way of funneling you through that one particular storage area. And there's actually a trigger which closes the door behind you. But I ended up messing it up somehow, and I didn't manage to trigger it, so the door was left open, and that led to some complications later on. Some obvious texture reuse here. This is storage area A, and so is the one behind us. Here's the other side of the broken door at the main entrance, so we've got a fair idea of where we are. And in this little nook we've got a fairly obvious secret. I think it's pretty apparent that we have to break all of the wood and then there'll be a treat of some kind inside. But well, I tried to do it in a fancy way with a grenade and I ended up doing it really badly. I mean, the first grenade just seems to disappear into nowhere. I think it fell through the floor or something. And the second one barely does any damage at all, so I have to just go in and do the job by hand. It's not very satisfying at all. A little disappointing to find out there's only armor, but I guess it's better than nothing. Really could do with some health though. In here we've got some lavatories. I'm guessing it's male only because of the urinals. It's in fact the only toilets that are around. And is traditional in all these kinds of games, we have to try all of the bathroom stalls and try to turn on at least one of the toilets. Sadly, nothing fancy in this game. Although there is a bucket of water and a broom. before we head back to the storage area, we're going to check out the upstairs. As you can see here, we're at the top of the flight of stairs, and here's the first point of note. You can't make it all the way across here because obviously there's a gap, and you can't make the jump either. That'll become important later on. If you remember a few episodes back in the Nippon Hotel, I kind of explained how the sector map generation stuff worked, in that if you're standing in one place it won't render the rest or update the rest of the map just to save on processing and rendering and stuff. And basically there's a bug right here. You can obviously see that something has gone very wrong. Basically everything seems to be kind of reversed. It thinks I'm somewhere that I'm not, so nothing renders right. In that room there is still a guy and he's still shooting at me, but I can't see him because as far as the game's concerned I literally cannot see him and it will not render him. The ultimate solution is basically, I mean, I was going to quit, but unfortunately I saved as soon as it happened, so I couldn't really retrace my steps back to an earlier save, so I had to literally just back up and go out the way I came and kind of hug the wall that I triggered the bug with in the first place, and it reset it and put it back the way it was, thankfully. It could have been extremely annoying, but it ended up just being a weird little bug. And there we are, back to normal. I'm just gonna try making the jump at the top of the stairs here a couple of times, just ignore me. Okay, now we're, after that fairly sizable detour, we're back on track. We basically just have to make our way through this room, but we'll have a look about first. As you can see here, they haven't really textured around the door properly. And that little jump, I think, is where I went wrong. You see, I jumped over the railing and I actually didn't walk down a bit of the corridor, and I think that is where the trigger is for closing the big storage door behind us. So I ended up just kind of causing a little bit more trouble for myself. At the end of the day, it really made no difference because I still would have got myself into a pickle anyway. But yeah. They should really rethink where their triggers are placed, obviously, if you can just bypass them as easily as that. Down at the very bottom is a first aid station, and that's to do with the gas related thing I mentioned when we first come into in from the car park. We'll come back to that. Some very nice holes in the walls here. We'll get a couple of good looks at that. I'm not really sure what this room, or in fact this entire building, has to do with the train station, because I mean it's got all this gasworks stuff going on and it doesn't really seem to have an obvious purpose. But anyway, we're as you can probably see, we're down at on the bottom floor with the broken gas pipes were at, and it's actually a main control room, and this is what we used to open that gigantic door we were at before, using some controls up at the very top. Here are the controls, and only one of them can actually be activated. Obviously it's the one in the middle with the green button, so we'll go ahead and do that. Picture of the door on the screen doesn't actually open, instead we get a little bit of text that pops up. In fact, the door won't open until we actually walk up to it, but anyway, we've been told what we've done, so we can get back to things. We'll delay the progress for the moment just so we can have a little look down in here. We get some health, and we also get some, again, some nice geometry to have a look at. Some absolutely pointless, I don't know what to call it. It's like part of the concrete's just crumbled away, but it doesn't really make any sense. Did a blast go off and knock that giant hole? It doesn't. I have no idea, but it looks great, and I like the fact that there's a little torch that kind of shines on it. It's very nice. I'll just speed up this bit to get us back a little bit quicker. We've got a catwalk up there, but that door doesn't open, so we have to go along the bottom. This door opens on its own, and that is the way we need to go, but keep an eye on my health and see if you can figure out what's going on. Did you guess what it is? Well, the coughing might have given it away, but we're standing directly above the broken gas pipes. So what's happening is that the gas is coming up through the floor and killing us that way. It's very sloppy. You can see here that I even try to hug the wall to minimize the damage, but it still gets me. Yeah. I don't remember it being this bad before, but it was particularly, it came up quite a lot in this episode when I was recording it. And that marks the final fight that we really have to do for this particular building. It's really just a case of leaving the building now and carrying on. This end of the catwalk leads to a dead end, but it shows us a part of the level that we've been to before. If we head off in the other direction, that leads us to the top of the staircase, the side that we couldn't get to before, and that provides us with a ladder which we use to get to the rooftop. First thing to see is the signal transmission stuff has turned from red to green, indicating obviously that there's been a change in our favour. So all we have to do is just follow that along to the door. But I'm just going to take a wander around and show you some of the other stuff on the rooftop. This hole that's in the roof leads down into the main corridor, and I will be going down this again. I really shouldn't have, because it's going to waste a hell of a lot of time, but I will. I'll regret it immediately. There's actually a couple of safe ways to get down, I mean, as in ways that don't involve just jumping straight down into the snow. We've got this rooftop over here, towery thing that we were at before, and there's also a ladder on the opposite side of the building we were just in. So there's a couple of ways down. Although the windows in the ceiling wouldn't have been immediately obvious, this is the corridor with the trigger that I skipped by jumping over the railing, and the one that had the first aid thing down at the very bottom. There's kind of no point to it being there, but it's there, so I'll shoot the glass anyway. And now we're back inside the building. If you listen carefully when I go into the storage area, you can hear the door closing behind me and some guy shouting. That's me triggering the trigger properly. You might be wondering why I came inside the building when I'm pretty much done with it. The reason is there's that first aid station thing that really I could have avoided, but because it was just annoying me so much that I had no idea how to get down there, I decided to go exploring. This ended up being the solution to actually get down there. You're not supposed to be able to do this. The railing itself does have a barrier high enough so that you can't jump over that. I end up just kind of fudging it, obviously, by jumping on this box and flinging myself over that way. Okay, and now that we're down here, we've got full health and full armor, so it's been a very productive trip. If we look around, there's no way to get back up. There's no ladder or anything like that. The only way to go is through the gas room. And this is when I realised what the solution was. The first two holes in the pipe, they are timed and they turn on and off, and I felt like an idiot for not noticing it the first time. So I just dashed through and thought that was it. Patted myself on the back, but my troubles weren't over yet. This is where the confusion starts. I'm supposed to be able to go through this shutter, but it's closed behind me, and I have to go that way because that's the way that leads up to the ladder eventually to get out onto the roof. And I know that if I can't go through there, I'm stuck. There's absolutely no way out because I thoroughly explored the place before, and there's nothing I can do. Thankfully I fast forwarded this part. It's just me going round and round and round and round trying to make that jump, eventually not making it. But you'll see eventually how I managed to get through it in the end. There we go, nothing like a little bit of sequence breaking. You're not supposed to make that, but well, with a bit of persistence you can pretty much do anything in Chaser, especially if it involves breaking the game somehow. Here's the ladder you can use to climb down, unless you're like me and slip. And you might have heard that, the falling damage was a cough for some reason. It confused me, thinking I was getting poisoned again. And all we have to do now is make a trek for the door. It's a little while to get there, but when we do, the door nicely opens for us. Well, looks like we may have some company. Well, we're now in the train station itself, very close to where we started, so we just basically have to clear out all of these guys and take a short trip. As much as I like this level, I do feel it goes on just a bit too long. By the time you get to this section, you really have no idea where you are in relation to where you started, although we'll find out soon enough. It's still... it could have done with being a little bit shorter. There's some sections that could have probably been trimmed down or removed, but maybe it's just the fact that the levels tend to be quite big anyway, but it's probably more the case that it gets you to kind of stick around in one area for quite a long time before moving on to the next one. It's almost as if this is 3 levels put together, just for the sake of it being possible. I mean, they could have chopped it up in a kind of Half-Life kind of way, but decided not to, and you end up with something that just seems to take so long. Now It's quite easy to just run ahead into that wide open space, and I admit that it was the first thing that I did the first time I played this level, but it's a much better idea to take your time around the containers and just kind of play things a little bit slowly. Over in this direction we've got a little building that we can't go into. In fact, we can't go into any of these buildings. But over here we've got the fence that we were at the very start of the level, and just up to the side of it is the gate. So let's take a wander over there. I really don't get that. I just don't understand. You go to the gate and you press the button and it unlocks the gate. It doesn't open or do anything like that. I just don't get it. You can see that I'm just confused and I'm standing around not knowing what to do, and then deciding to just wander off and see if I can find something else to do. But yeah, it's confusing that it requires this step and doesn't explain it to you. In fact, this little shed is where you're supposed to be heading, and on that note, I guess we're done here, so I'll see you next time.
It should not have ended this way. Not this way. Because of that slaughter, we will have the whole Red Army on our trail. I will kill him. Truly, I will kill him.
Are you sure? Do you really want to kill him?
If the Russians find his body, their problems are over, and, with luck, the investigation will be closed. I really do not wish to find myself dead because of some miserable Martian bastard.
Next time on Chaser.
He used to give me roses. I wish he could again, but that was on the outside, and things were different then. On the inside, the sun still shines, and the rain falls down, but the sun